Now that Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is out in theaters, a lot of fans around the world have been very curious about what could have been by Disney and Lucasfilm based on all the different reshoots and the rewrites of this movie that made the production of Episode 9 very difficult. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, one thing about Episode 9, without question, is that yes, the movie got mixed reviews if you go ahead and look at Rotten Tomatoes, or if you ask anybody who has seen the film. I myself personally, everybody that I know, very little people actually really hated the movie, but there's a lot of other people out there that really thought it was a decent film with a lot of problems embedded within the actual movie, which is honestly how I felt. If you guys have seen my spoilers review and my initial reaction of The Rise of Skywalker, is that yes, I do believe that this movie is decent, but there's a lot of scenes that I hate and there's a lot of scenes that I love. It really is like an emotional roller coaster, and what could have been is rather unfortunate because there were a lot of scenes that were deleted from Episode 9 because of all the different reshoots and the rewrites that took place. Now, on top of all of this, the problem with Disney and Lucasfilm is that, yes, there has been quite a lot of, inconsistencies within the Star Wars franchise ever since Disney took over Lucasfilm, especially with creatives that were on board, such as directors and writers, and how stories were and, were going to be told originally compared to how they were actually done. Now, on top of all of this, it's explained that both Disney and Lucasfilm went through many changes and adjustments during the months of August, September, and October, while the reshoots and the rewrites for the film were taking place. It's said that all of these changes led to a series of deleted scenes, many of which George Lucas directed and wrote for the film with J.J. Abrams. One of the vital scenes of the film that were deleted involved the original death of Emperor Palpatine that was all directed by George Lucas. Now, it's explained that the original scene was shot over at both Pinewood and Cardington over in the UK that involved Ian McDiarmid's portrayal as Darth Sidious, where Sidious originally was going to fight both Ben Solo and Rey inside of his throne room on Exegol, where he would even use his very own lightsaber at times during the scene, giving fans a callback to Revenge of the Sith. It's said that the sequence that was shot involved a segment in which Palpatine technically dies twice in the movie that was directed by George Lucas. The first death of Palpatine was the death of his actual body, when both Ben and Rey are able to strike down Darth Sidious with their saber by stabbing him with Leia and Anakin's lightsabers to where his body would fall down the ground and begin to melt away as a red shapeless spirit of Sidious would actually rise from the dead melted body of Palpatine and enter into the personal Dark Acolyte, who originally was portrayed by Matt Smith and stood over the actual throne next to actually Palpatine during the battle between both Ben and Rey. Now, once the spirit took over the Acolyte, he would fight both both Rey and Ben Solo, and eventually Rey would actually get injured and knocked out unconscious in the background, where he and Ben would actually fight to the death. This is where Ben Solo would stab the Acolyte, eventually killing him, where Palpatine's spirit would take over Ben Solo. However, only partially, since Ben Solo still had control over his thoughts and his voice, but did not have the ability to control his body and begs Rey to kill him. Once Ben Solo dies by the hands of Rey indirectly, the spirit of Sidious exits the actual body and is eventually dragged into the netherworld of the Force by the Force ghosts of Luke Skywalker, Anakin, Yoda, Kenobi, Leia, and others, to where Palpatine would deliver a different type of scream as his shapeless spirit is vulnerable and to actually be taken into a light side-oriented realm, as the Force ghosts of the past vanish along with Palpatine's spirit and killing him in the process. Now, the scene involved two deaths essentially, one of Palpatine's real body, and of course of his spirit in the film. This was all cut by Disney and Lucasfilm as they eventually felt it was way too long of an ending battle, and a bit too dark for the children to see on the big screen, and so they decided to stick with a more Marvel-esque ending for the death of Palpatine once Rey deflects the lightning back at Palpatine, saying, "And I am all of the Jedi," obliterating him into nothing as the Sith Sanctuary begins to crumble into nothing but rubble, where this was a way by Disney and Lucasfilm to also shorten the running time of the movie and to keep the Force ghosts of the past a big mystery for the audience around the world. So let's go over a couple of parts about this. Now, the thing about Palpatine's original death here is that this to me sounds more proper, this sounds more original and unexpected. If you look at what was done in The Rise of Skywalker, it was pretty generic and pretty expected. You know, what other way was Rey really going to kill Palpatine, right? Off the top of your head, right? It was either going to have something to do with his own lightning getting thrown back at him, or something around the lines of Rey striking him down with a saber. Now, the original death of Palpatine seemed a bit more complex and original, like I say, very unexpected, and would have been a bigger surprise in my book. Now, the fact that there were going to be 2 deaths of Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker, I think is a very interesting thing that was actually, you know, attempted by George Lucas. The fact that his body actually dies and melts away as the spirit rises out of his chest when he's actually, you know, struck down by both Ben Solo and Rey. You have the death of his body, and then you have the death of his spirit later on in the movie, where the Force ghosts of Luke, Anakin, Kenobi, Yoda, etc., they literally grab hold of Palpatine's spirit and drag him into the netherworld. Now, this was honestly based off of Star Wars Legends, in case you guys did not know. In Star Wars Legends, Palpatine dies twice. In the EU, we have a thing called Dark Empire. In Dark Empire, he actually dies by the hands of his own power. And then later on, he's also killed by one of the Jedi, who becomes a part of Palpatine's spirit and dies and goes into the netherworld. So it's somewhat similar. The Dark Empire comic line honestly brought a great return of Palpatine, and how they modeled it after him in the original, you know, death of Palpatine, you know, before the reshoots and the rewrites. You could really see that J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio paid a lot of attention to the Star Wars Legends material, as well as George Lucas. Now, obviously, in case you guys have not been following, over 60% of George's scenes were deleted for this movie, a majority of which had to do with Palpatine, Anakin, and Luke. A lot of those segments that were deleted from the movie. Whether or not we will be seeing these on the Blu-ray is a big mystery open on the table. We're not quite sure. You know, for all we know, we won't be getting this until years from now with a different box set, you know, for Star Wars overall. Maybe a 10-year anniversary of the sequel trilogy, who knows, right? So, everything related to Palpatine here is that this to me sounds like a more proper death. It sounds like a more equal death to me, because Rey just killing Palpatine like that, in my point of view, it was very weak, and it's one of the big things that I don't like about the movie. Like I say, I think that The Rise of Skywalker is a decent Star Wars film with a lot of flaws, but that was the one big flaw for me, was that, of course, Palpatine dying by the hands of his granddaughter so easily. You would think that maybe he would just decide to stop shooting Force lightning at her so she can't deflect it back at him, something like that. But meanwhile, you know, we have this original segment by George and JJ and Chris Terrio, where it was going to be very unexpected. It would have included the Force Ghosts, it would have included both Ben Solo and Rey fighting Darth Sidious. Keep in mind that in the finalized version of the movie, Ben Solo doesn't even get to fight Palpatine. All he literally gets to do with Palpatine is literally get picked up by Palpatine, where Palpatine states, you know, as I once fell, so forth the last Skywalker, and chucks him into the pit on Exegol, where he later, you know, rises and climbs out of the pit. So, the thing about this, and the last thing I just want to go over here real quick, is that George Lucas, let's just say this, he's a visionary. He has at least original ideas. I don't know about you, but to me, the very ending of The Rise of Skywalker, and let me know if you guys agree or disagree with me on this, it really mirrored Avengers Endgame. There's no doubt about it. It was really like the I am Iron Man moment where, you know, Thanos says his line, then Iron Man says, you know, I am Iron Man. This scenario we have Palpatine saying, I am all of the Sith, then Rey states, and I am all of the Jedi, as she kills Palpatine right then and there. Palpatine literally vanishes, like piece by piece no less, kind of similar to how Lord Voldemort dies or Thanos dies. It's almost similar. So, obviously, J.J. Abrams took notes from Marvel in order to tell a very unique and different story, but at the same exact time, copying elements of Avengers Endgame, which I'm not quite sure how a lot of fans feel about that. I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, but That being said, the original Death of Palpatine sounds more interesting and intriguing, at least to me as a Star Wars fan. So with that being said, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to morning.